Okay. So it takes how long? Do you know when it's functioning, Di?
Just coming up now through you, the chair. Yes, ready.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to welcome you all to the second meeting of the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee. You might recall we had our first or our inaugural meeting on the 11th of February, which seems like a lifetime ago in a different world, which in fact it was. So I think this is the second meeting of this committee today. So welcome along. The interest declarations of interest and so on. Simon, how do we deal with that these days? If anyone wants to update, then they can contact Di. I think, is that the way that works?
Yeah, it's been circulated on Microsoft Teams for anyone to fill any concerns there.
Yeah, thank you. So just be aware of that obligation if you need to update your personal details. The meeting, you've had circulated on Teams the minutes of the inaugural meeting that I've just referred to, held on the 11th of February. You may recall at that meeting, the main matter we considered were the terms of reference for the committee, and a number of other matters as well. I think Monique daunted us with a description of all of the projects that we would be dealing with as a committee, and we'll be hearing from her a little later today. So does anyone have any issues over the minutes of that meeting that they need to raise? They seem to be okay to me. That being the case, would someone like to move, please, the adoption of the minutes of the meeting of the 11th of February? Someone like to move, stick their hand up. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Thank you. All those in favour, wave your hands, please. Which I think we probably have to do, seeing people have their microphones muted. We probably have to do it that way. Okay, Simon, I think the next matter is an update on capital projects. Is it or the action list? Simon, what do you want to deal with?
We'll go through the action list as the first point, point 5.
Yep.
So I'll just take you through. Lewis will take you through the action list there.
Yep.
Just sorry, through the chair, Francois, an apology.
Thank you, Councillor Madgwick. Louis, welcome to the meeting, and fire away.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Gubbis. I'll just run through the action list. So first item is pension housing. The upgrade of the bathroom in Revel Street have been completed. The next action item is that we should include $40,000 for the upgrade of 3 bathrooms for the 2021 annual plan, and that's been included in the annual plan. Next item, we establish a trial subcommittee for the wilderness trial, cycle trial. Draft terms of reference have been completed, and we'll discuss that later on in today's meeting. Any questions?
Just that last point is to dissolve the other trust, which is the Westland Wilderness Trust. I've yet to have done that, but it's just a process to go through. I need to discuss with Grey District Council, which I haven't done yet.
Thank you, Louis. Anyone else have any questions about the action plan? Okay, just one other little admin matter we just have to finalise. We need a motion accepting Francois' apology. Someone like to move? Well, I will move that his apology be accepted. Someone like Councillor Hart, you raised your hand. All those in favour, please wave your hands. Thank you. Okay, Simon, next matter.
So the next item on the agenda was a presentation from Dominica on the capital projects. So Di, do you want to put that on to share? Have you got a copy of it there?
Just through you, Chair, we're unable to share the PowerPoint presentations.
Because of live streaming.
That's correct, yes.
Has everyone got a copy of the presentation in front of them? If you go into Microsoft Teams, you'll see it there on the as a download.
Anyone have any issues about it?
So I'll get
Any-
Dominica to walk you through each of the various aspects of the report. Dominica, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And if I may, Deputy Mayor Carruthers,
Yeah.
I'll go through each of the slides. If you have questions, please do feel free to ask them. The first slide is just an introduction of updating that I will update you of all the projects, or at least a majority of them. The second slide presents a summary of the capital projects for this year. You will be able to see the different categories like water supply, wastewater, stormwater, solid waste, etc., and the various townships going down in the rows. And this is just an overall view of where we are with each of these projects, including the totals for each. The total capital budgeted that was adopted in the annual plan was just larger than $11 million, while the actual projects completed for this year would be 9.75 million. So there's a difference of approximately 1.4 million. Does anybody have specific questions on this slide?
Yeah, sorry, just one question. Is this up until the end of April?
No, this is up until the end of the financial year. So that is from the beginning of the financial year, June, to the end of the financial year.
So it's
So-
forecast to
So
complete.
it's a forecast, it's not
Yes,
actual.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
fine.
This is still a forecast, 100% correct. This is
Okay.
still a forecast of what we are planning to do this year.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, good. The third slide is a summary just projecting for the next year. Again, this is it's presented in the same format. And this is a final budget. It's obviously subject to approval and adoption by the council. This is the proposed annual plan then for capital projects for the next financial year. So there we have a total of just over $11 million. Is there a specific question on this slide?
Can I just ask, if I can just interrupt, Dominique, can you people see my face?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got Zoom minimized, so I can just look at the presentation on my computer. I can't see any of you. Just wondering whether you could see me. No, that's fine. Dominic can just continue. Thanks.
Okay.
Any further questions of Dominic about that?
All right, I'll move on to slide number 4 then. Here in slide number 4, I'm just giving a number of examples of the couple of I would think interesting projects that we have under water supply. So I'll go through each of the different categories in each of the different slides. So for example, we have an update on the Hokitika water meter replacement, the Arahura water treatment plant upgrade, the Fox Glacier water treatment upgrade, the replacement of the treated water reservoir in Haast, and the Hokitika water mains replacement. I've provided an update. I assume you would be happy to ask me any questions if there's anything specific. I assume I don't have to go through each of the entire verbiage in this meeting. Otherwise, I'll do some more daunting talking here today.
So just councillor, I do encourage, if you do have any clarification requirements, please raise your hand, and we have a lot of detail in each of this presentation, but as you can understand, there's a lot of projects on our books, but we can provide further details as required.
Correct. Thank you, Simon, for that clarification. And I think if there are other projects that are specifically concerning you that I might have not listed, then please feel free to ask me at any time.
Yeah, through the chair, Dominic.
Yes, please.
Just on the Hokitika water mains, you got Hannam Street practical completion satisfied, but awaiting final documentation and completion for reinstatement when possible. Is there a time frame on that?
Once we're able to come out of the COVID-19 restrictions, then Westroads would be able to continue with the reinstatement. That was just not able to happen during this last while, but the practical completion is completed. We've got documentation signed for that, and yeah, and we're just waiting on a number of other documentation still according to the contract so that it can be finalized and completely finished.
So when we come out, would there be a time frame on it when it is completed?
Yes. Well, I'd have to get the latest update from Westroads. I have not been able to catch up with the representative there. That meeting is going to happen next week, Wednesday. We're going to go through that and get the latest update, because what I currently have is still from before we went into lockdown with COVID-19. So as soon as I have an update, I would think it's not going to be much longer. I would think something between 2 to 4 weeks, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Slide number 5 shows the capital projects, or some of them, for wastewater. So here we have the new the wastewater treatment plant built in Franz Joseph. The wastewater mains upgrade upstream of that Franz Joseph wastewater treatment. The Hokitika wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The Hokitika ocean outfall structure. The Fox Glacier wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And the Franz Joseph and Hokitika campervan dump stations. As with the previous slide, I probably should have mentioned that the little asterisks indicated where we had obtained TIF funding. So the total project budget is given in total. That is also not only including this year, that is for the total project, which could in some instances spread over a number of years, and includes, with an asterisk, includes the TIF funding.
So does everyone understand what TIF funding actually means? So it's tourism.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Just want
to funding. Yeah, sorry, Simon.
Sorry, through the chair. I just want to point out a couple of points here. Both the Hokitika wastewater treatment upgrade and obviously the ocean outfall are very dependent on submissions through the annual plan process. If the outcome of a submission is that we are looking at a new location for our wastewater treatment plant, we won't be spending all of that allocation to the upgrade of the Hokitika ponds. So we'll just have to revisit that that capital project in its entirety.
Correct. You are 100% correct, Simon. All of those could still be subject to a number, well, not all of them. You are correct. Just this particular one could be subject to some changes. So slide number 6 is the capital project for stormwater and solid waste.
Sorry, Councillor Hart has a question. You probably can't see him.
Sorry, no, I can't see. I'm sorry. Yes?
You're on mute, Councillor Hart. Oh, Councillor Hart's on, sorry.
The wastewater upstream of in France from the ponds, is that sorted, or there was a bit of a problem there with going through the ground?
In France, so this is only the wastewater mains line that is from the water treatment plant back into Franz Joseph.
Yes.
So that is being completed with the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant.
I'm just wondering how you're getting on with that. Was stopped, wasn't it, for
the realignment?
Reasons?
We had to move to a different order of the
Oh, no.
So that is a slightly different line to what I'm talking about here. The wastewater mains upgrade is a separate project, and it's just that line update. The issue I think that you're talking about here with the land, where we had to realign pipeline, that is still part of the physical upgrade and build of the water treatment plant.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so slide number 6, stormwater and solid waste. The first 3 projects are stormwater, and the last 3 projects are solid waste projects. So under stormwater, we have the Tankard Street pump station upgrade. We have the Livingston Street mains upgrade and the new pump station there. And we have the Beach Street realignment. And for solid waste, we have the intermediate capping of Butler's landfill, the Fox Glacier landfill armoring, and Hannah's clearing landfill protection. Are there any specific questions on that? Otherwise, we can go to slide number 7. This is the leadership projects that you would be familiar with, the council headquarter refurbishment and update on that, the information management upgrade, and the IT replacements. Then
You were, I think, Dominique,
Yep.
we had been awaiting a seismic evaluation of the building. Is that
Yes.
in yet?
no, that hasn't come in yet. I know that Simon Ayres has discussed that with the relevant engineers, and they were coming out, I believe, in the middle of May to do that sign assessment. I will
Okay.
follow up with Simon. That was definitely going to happen as soon as we are able to get, because they have to come from Christchurch. So as soon as they're able to come across, we were scheduling that.
Great. Thank you.
I'll follow up with Simon about that.
Thank you.
Earthquake strengthening, yeah. Perfect. Then I just wanted to, I don't want to forget about transport. So we have 14 projects ongoing to ensure the continual road infrastructure is being maintained. And there are contributions from NZTA there, and those are progressing as we expect. Specific attention that might be of interest to you is there for the footpath and drainage. So I've added a slide just on some of the footpath upgrade projects that are being worked on currently and that we are planning. Then the drainage and renewals and footpaths work that are presently in progress, as well as the footpath works that are already completed for this year. That is visible on slide number 8. So just to note that some of the drainage upgrades, they also include the curb and channel repairs for some of those areas of footpaths where that was required. So you have an update of what we are estimating those costs to be. On slide number 9, I presented the capital projects for planning and regulatory. So they include the Emergency Operations Center and the Civil Defense Satellite and Data Voice Servicing Infrastructure. That still has to be done next year. And then the stage 1 of the Lake Canary Cycle Trail, that's part of the West Coast Wilderness Trail project. On slide number 10, we see the leisure services capital projects, or some of them. Here I mentioned the earthquake strengthening of the Carnegie building, the heating system for the Ross swimming pool, the new toilets for Kamara, Ross and Whataroa townships, the waterfront development, Sunset Point project, and then Cuss Square. At this stage, that's only the bark chip replacement, not looking at the playgrounds. That is a separate project. And again, the total project budgets that's costed, the asterisk includes external funding. In this particular case, it's not only to funding, but we have, for example, for the Carnegie building, as you will see later, we have made applications to other funding like the lotteries, as you're aware of.
What's the completion date now for Sunset Point, Dominique? That's, I presume, pushed out a wee bit?
Yes, Sunset Point, we are approximately 40% completed. So we are hoping to complete that next year.
Oh, next year?
Next financial year.
Right, I see. Yeah.
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 So the target is to have it completed before this coming summer.
Right.
So I think Louise confirmed that most of the earthworks will be completed by end of August.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
So that
correct.
order has been given to the successful tenderer.
Yep. I can report there the works have commenced. So contractors on site currently commencing that works.
Yep. About 40%.
Your worship?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, Dominique, very pleased to see the new pumps have arrived for Tancred Street.
Yes.
It's well overdue, many years overdue actually. It's great to see that. Canary School Crossing, I'm sure that the students at Canary School who did that magnificent presentation a year or so ago would love to be kept in the loop there. And I'm really enjoying the number of asterisks that you have beside projects where there's external funding coming rather than the ratepayer. So well done. Hey, so far, this is a good report.
Thank you.
Just for just through the chair, just in regards to Kumara, Ross and Watera Township toilet projects, we received a cheque in our bank the other day, just over $900,000. So it's gone a long way to obviously upgrading the facilities through the Westland region.
Yeah.
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, just through the chair, could you just tell us what the tender process being used for these capital projects?
Okay, that depends a little bit on, it depends largely on the total value of it. For example, our latest one is the Arahura water treatment plant. What we do is we put a tender document together that includes, for example, for this Arahura water treatment plant, is based on an NZS 3916, so a design and construct contract, where we would put in all the technical information and details, all the drawings and maps that we do have, and our specific requirements. Then that documentation gets put onto GETS. That's a government website for tenderers, where those companies that are registered would be able to see those tenders. When we feel that local companies might not be registered on GETS, we would also put this particular tender in a local newspaper, like we've done for the Carnegie Building Earthquake Strengthening Project. Once we have received tenders back from GETS, we would evaluate them on a technical basis. There would be a tender evaluation team that would only look at the technical aspects of the tender. So for those companies who would qualify and to what level they have presented themselves in the tender, so how they meet our criteria. Then we would look at cost, what their tender price was eventually, and in the end, we complete a spreadsheet that's according to the government regulations and our own requirements that we set in our policy, and we would then have one preferred tenderer. That information gets then summarized in a report and is presented at one of the council meetings. And then so that you can then make a decision on whether we would go with that particular general preferred tenderer, or if that needed further discussion. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Once that decision is made, we will then finalize the contract with that preferred tenderer, and if there are any other negotiations necessary, and then we would place purchase orders and start with the contract. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Very helpful, Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dominic. Anyone else have any?
Well, just through the chair, just to confirm, this is all following our procurement policy.
Yes.
So that's our guiding principle in terms of all tenders and procurement processes.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, Dominic, is that the end of what you want to present to us?
Yes, that is the end of my presentation today.
Thank you, Dominic. That's very helpful and very interesting as well. And
Thank you.
that's great. Do we need a formal motion accepting Dominic's report?
Yes, please, Chair.
We do.
Yes. Yeah.
Would someone like to move that we accept the Dominic's report, please? Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn, and seconded Councillor Davidson. All those in favour, please wave your hands. Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Dominic. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, Simon, we now move back to the agenda, I think, don't we?
Yes, we are. So the next item on the agenda is the Carnegie Building report. I'll hand over to Louis Sparks to present.
Thanks, Louis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers. The Kaniki building report, I taken that as read by all. There is 4 options presented to the committee today in regards to how we proceed with the project. So just if I can summarize those options. Option 1 is to continue the project with a full scope and confirming that the additional funds required to cover the full shortfall will be committed to. That amount is an additional $794,000. Option 2 is to continue with the full scope of the project only if the additional funding is sourced for the specifically for the 3 applications recently submitted for the additional funding required to complete the project. And those 3 funds applications that's been applied for was through lotteries, the Culture and Heritage Fund, and also the Crown Infrastructure Partners, the CIP funds. Which is the recent announced shovel-ready projects. So option 2 is then, we should only.
You're muted, Louis. Louis, you're muted.
Sorry, there we go. Sorry, apologies. Sorry, I was saying then option 2 then is the full scope of work with the project. No, I'm muted. Sorry, thank you. Sorry, apologies for that interruption. Continue with the full scope of the project with the additional funding sourced. That was option 2. Option 3 is downgrade the scope of works as outlined in the report. In other words, we exclude some of the fittings, outfit of the building, and with those options removed, as well as the contingency for the project removed. And that brings us back into budget and then progressing then with a reduced scope of works, which is mainly the earthwork strengthening structural works. Option 4 is to put the entire project on hold and council not to sign the contract then with the contract at this stage, just leave the building empty and the museum pieces in storage until we find additional funding, then obviously in future, and then continue the project and whenever we then source adequate funding. So those are the 4 options presented to council today. Our recommendation would be option 2 is to continue with the full scope of the project once we source the additional funding, or once we're successful with the additional funding as per the recent applications. If we don't actually achieve any of the funding applications, then we recommend to resort to option 4, which is to put the project on hold indefinitely until we can revisit the project when funding is available. And then also that funding will then include the upgrade of Drummond Hall or the museum at the same time. So any questions?
Thank you for that, Louis. It's been an endless and lengthy merry-go-round, the Carnegie building, trying to determine what's the best way forward. Can I just challenge your thinking in terms of the options? I agree that we should, in the first instance, proceed with option 2. But then if we're unable to source the additional funding, in my view, we would be much better to continue with the work to secure the building and earthquake strengthen it, which I think is your option 4, isn't it?
Yep. Sorry.
No, not option 4. 3.
3.
Yep.
3. Sorry, 3. So rather than simply putting the whole thing on hold, we should in fact do what we can. We have the funds available to do that, and therefore I'm struggling with the rationale to basically mothball the project, which is only going to cost us more if we mothball it for some time and then come to do it. We have the funds. It's not costing us anything to do this, the basic seismic strengthening work. So in my view, the better approach would be option 2 followed by option 3 rather than option 4. Simon.
Just through the chair, I just want to clarify, it is costing council money. So we've only got $1 million of guaranteed funding.
Yes, yes.
So there's another $577,000 of council money committed to complete the basic earthquake strengthening. The other issue that we will face is lotteries, is in terms of the scope of expectations of that fund. So that fund is meant to have taken us to a museum grade standard. So we would have to, we've already indicated to them that we might get a variation of scope, but it would be a variation of scope which they would have to approve for us to enable us to get that funding, retain that funding.
Simon, can I ask you what your view is about what I suggested as the sequence, the options?
So we should know by the end of May is the anticipation from both lotteries and culture and heritage. So we're only 3 weeks away from a decision. If we do defer this to the next long-term plan round, we can then revisit it as part of an overarching museum structure, as part of that fund that we have in the long-term plan. So we can recalibrate as well as a possibility with regards to the future of the museum. A lot of this will depend on the outcome of the PGF application for the Panamu Pathway project. There's a lot of things still in flux right now, which makes it hard to make a decision.
So in the light of that, Simon, is it premature for us to make any real decisions now?
So I would recommend that we make the decision of option 2 and revisit if options, because we can always come back to council with another approach in the future period.
Thank you, Simon. Councillors, any further input or questions, comments?
Councillor Madrick wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry, Paul, you're in the dark slightly there. I didn't see your hand.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, through the chair. I think that I think we've looked at this the wrong way around, to be honest. I can see the costs for earthquake strengthening the building will just continue to escalate. And in the post-COVID world, the report notes that the cost of steel, for instance, will go up. This hasn't been factored in there. I think there are a lot of unknowns going into this, I just can see the costs going on and on and on. Why I say that I think we're looking at it the wrong way is and I won't be very popular for saying this, but we're looking at the Carnegie building as its own entity. I think we should be looking at it as a museum, the future museum as well. And in doing so, I think there's a 5th option. And the 5th option I would suggest would be that we retain the walls of the Carnegie building, gut the inside of it and rebuild completely a whole new museum. So you're keeping the facade only. I don't see the need to keep the entire building intact, to be honest. The architectural beauty of the building is in the facade. What I'm suggesting is to do a Christchurch answer. You only keep the facade and you rebuild behind it. And behind it, you would rebuild, you'd bowl the Drummond Hall, the museum from 1973, which needs to come down anyway. And we could build a whole new museum within the walls of the what's currently the Carnegie building for a whole new museum. And you could go quite a way back in there. To just forge ahead and to upgrade the Carnegie building is for what purpose? It's too small to be the museum. It could serve a purpose as the art gallery for sure, but it's not the only space that should be available for that. I mean, we've got an eyesight that's in the post-COVID world as well is probably going to be redundant. And I've said before, when we looked at the future of the council chambers, that I think there's a poor use of space there anyway. I think it takes up far too much room. Whether there's an eyesight in the future or not, I think that space could be easily adapted into a new art gallery space within the council building. In other words, where the eyesight is, which would leave the Carnegie building or the bones of the Carnegie building to become a whole new museum. Now we've talked over the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm talking here of Potaningaito, we've talked with the council about developing a national Pounamu centre based around the museum and around the Carnegie building. That got bowled for 6. And the Pounamu pathway, I don't think the council should hang any hopes on that, because the Pounamu pathway won't be the answer for the future museum of Hokitika. As I've also said before, the museum is the soul of the town. And I think it's a tragedy that the museum has been left to flounder for so long. I think the priority ought to be to get the museum going again. The money has been put aside for a future museum. And I think with a little lateral thinking, that could save the facade of the Carnegie building, and you could spend that money that's set aside for a new museum. You can do both. But to plough ahead and to save the Carnegie building, I really don't see the end purpose of it, to be honest. And it's going to cost an awful lot of money to keep a building that the interior isn't fit for purpose in the 21st century. But the facade is certainly worth keeping.
Just through the chair, thank you, Paul, for that. So that was really what option 4 is all about, is to actually recalibrate through a long-term plan around the future of the museum and also the other buildings associated with it, and just recalibrate again, rather than going blindly, like you were saying, into a rebuild that could blow out in terms of cost. If we're going to commit another $800,000 now to get it back to an existing structure, is that wisely spent?
I don't think it is. I don't think it, through the chair, I don't think it's a wise use of money. And at a time like this, when businesses and ratepayers are struggling, but business in particular is facing such an uncertain future. We've talked about in the draft annual plan about not to have any nice to haves. The nice to haves are to be set aside. Well, I think with due respect, this is very much in the nice to have category, but certainly not essential.
But Paul, what you're suggesting is going to be a lot more expensive project.
Not necessarily. I don't know about that. I'd like to see an engineer just cast an eye over the idea of gutting the building there to save the facade. As I say, as they've done in many buildings in Christchurch and other places, and to rebuild a structure behind it, which would be far more cost effective answer in my view, but I'm no engineer.
Your Worship.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, I look at it in a slightly different way, and that is that we have got a commitment of nearly $1 million from Development West Coast. We've got a commitment from Lotto. If we get a major earthquake, we will have a corner section full of bricks. And is that really the risk that we want to take with this building? The building has got historic value. It's very well supported in the town, and a lot of people who visit the town come and see it as one of the main things they come and go and have a look at. Mr. Carnegie's effort on the in Hokitika, and so option 2, I kind of think that if we can get the extra money, we should do it. And if we can't, then I think it should come back to council with a more detailed consideration of either option 3 or option 4. It's not straightforward, but this has been a 3-year journey so far, and of course it goes right back to 1996 when the community strengthened it the first time round. It was a massive community effort. So I don't think there's any doubt that the community have a place in their heart for this building, and that's where I come from.
So thank you, Your Worship. So Simon, just repeat what you said about the outcome of the present funding, shortfall funding applications.
So we have 3 applications in currently. One is a second application to lottery. So we've been successful with the first one. They have indicated that we could apply again for further funding. So we have done that for the shortfall. There's a second application, which is to the Culture and Heritage Fund of the same value. So we're banking on one or the other coming through. And there's obviously the new round of funding through the Crown Infrastructure Partners, which is a shovel-ready project, which is another application we've made for this work as well. So we've got 3 pieces of bait on the end of our line. We're hoping one will take. I would tend to agree with His Worship that if we wait until those decisions are finalised and then revisit and don't proceed with signing a tender. In the interim, we'll do some further work around the opportunity that Councillor Madjovic discussed around looking at a facade only and see what that would look like in terms of cost.
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, through the chair. I think that we should strengthen the building, but the most important thing is making sure that we've got a use for it, and even if we have some partnerships or MOUs put in place, I wouldn't be in support of spending over $1 million on it and little use out of it. So for me, it's we've got to make sure that the building can be used.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add? Councillor Hartshorn.
Yeah, through the chair. I'd have to agree with Councillor Davidson there. It's a lot of money, and we do need to get some return on it somehow. But it is a building that once it's gone, it's some of our earliest history in Hokitika, and we need to do what we can do to save it. I don't, yeah, I agree with sort of option 2 at the moment.
Do we have, thank you, a general consensus that the way forward here is to adopt option 4, option 2, sorry, option 2, and let's await the outcome of those, of the funding applications, and then Simon, we can convene another meeting of this committee to deal with any fallout from that.
I agree. I would endorse that.
Do we have a general agreement that that's the sensible way forward?
Yep, okay.
Do we need a motion to that effect? I suppose we do we?
Mm-hmm.
I'll move.
So there's the recommendations.
You've got recommendations there.
So do you want me to move that we adopt recommendation 2, and in the event that the funding is not secured,
So sorry, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, there's recommendations on pages of 13.
Yep.
So I suggest just A and B at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I move that the committee adopts recommendations A and B on page 13 of the Group Manager District Assets Report. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Hart's waved her hand. All those in favour, wave your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Councillor Madge, would you like that recorded, Paul?
No, it's fine.
Thank you. All right, thanks, guys. Let's hold our breath and hope that this will happen. Okay, Simon, we move on.
So the next report, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, is the adoption of the terms of reference for the West Coast Wilderness Trail Subcommittee and the appointment of committee members. This report was following on from the last Capital Projects and Tenders Committee. It's a recommendation to form a subcommittee to play the governance role of the cycle trail. If you look at the appendix, it actually identifies in the terms of reference that this is a missing link between the West Coast Wilderness Trail Trust and Council and other significant stakeholders in the trail. So the terms of reference basically sets out the way forward in terms of the committee structure and the way that it'll operate. I'll take the rest of the report as read, and just would like that council moves to set their subcommittee terms of reference and nominate the council representative.
So Simon, just so you're clear, we're clear. Council, that's our council, appoints the chairs. Is that what you were saying?
This committee appoints the chair.
This committee appoints the chair, who is also our representative.
Yes. So I understand that Councillor Davidson had put his hand up to take that role previously. Just want to formalise that if that's what council's intention is.
Your Worship.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, in the recommendation it says the chairperson, WDC appointed representative and appointed by the chair of the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee. Is that not the intention of the recommendation?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's a responsibility that would sit with the chair of the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee, would it not? That's how it reads to me.
Well, that's what it does say, yes. Simon, what's your view?
Yes, that's the way it's been tabled. Like I alluded to, we've had a previous not a recommendation, but an expectation that Councillor Davidson would be interested in that role. Just would like you to formalise that.
Councillor Davidson, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Any other councillors have any other views about the? Well, firstly, the terms of reference themselves and the role and appointment of the chair.
Through the chair, just the structure, the whakapapa that was given in the report showed that I just want to make sure I got this straight, that this subcommittee will be parallel to the trust, the Wilderness Trust. Is that how it works?
So the trust is a separate body, and they are obviously working as for the betterment of the trail. They don't have an official link other than through an MOU with council. So what we don't have is overarching guiding governance of the future of the trail. At the moment, was recommending that this subcommittee be that governance entity. In terms of the model, no, the trust would be reporting through to the governance group in terms of its plans. Because the trust, the council owns the trail. The trust can't make decisions on the trail without council input. So what we're saying is the subcommittee provides that input and comes through this Capital Projects and Tenders Committee and reports back to this group.
Councillor Madrick, anything else?
Oh yeah, I'm just unsure what the two roles are. You know, why it's necessary to have two separate entities.
There is no representation on the West Coast Wilderness Trail Trust for council. So they're making, well, they can't make decisions on the trail without council input. So this and other stakeholders input as well. There are other, for example, DOC, Trustpower, iwi, etc. need to have input on terms of the future of the trail as co-shares, well, as entities that are involved with either use of their land or of, I suppose, easements, etc. that are in place and agreements that are in place.
Yes, so through the chair, so that would be through the council, wouldn't it? So that hence the need for a subcommittee of the council.
Correct.
Yes, so I understand that. I'm looking at it the other way around. I'm wondering why do we need the trust any longer? If this subcommittee has got that representation externally as well, I don't see why there are two entities.
That entity is more around the trail users and the commercial entities that actually benefit from the trail.
So do you think, Simon, once that this is implemented, that might change the way the trust functions?
I think it'll formalise the way the trust interacts with council. They do a great job in marketing the trail and doing all the relevant requirements from MB and the New Zealand Cycle Trails. So they take that task on, which is quite significant. So we would have to employ a trail manager under that guise to do that work if the trust wasn't there.
And do you know what their view about the appointment of the subcommittee is? The
They're
trust
supportive, very supportive of it.
So they think this is the best way forward.
it is the missing link, and it's been, I suppose, outstanding for quite some time to formalise this arrangement.
All right.
It's based on the same model as the Southland Trails. So it's a common setup. It's not something that's unique to cycle trail management.
Thank you, Simon. Councillors, can I refer you to page 16, clause 6 of the agenda, and you'll see the options there. Preferred option is option 1. Someone prepared to move option 1? Your worship.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Crothers, I'd be prepared to move the option on page 16 with the inclusion of under chairperson that we request the chair to appoint Councillor Davidson as the first chair of the subcommittee, and that leaves the appointment of the chair in future times at the with the chair of the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee.
Understood. Thank you, Your Worship. Would someone like to second His Worship's motion? Councillor Hart, are we clear on what we're voting for? I think we are. All those in favour say aye or wave your hand, please. Anyone have a contrary view? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's move on, Simon.
I'd like to hand over to Transport Manager Carl Jackson. He's got 2 subjects he wants to discuss with Council. One is the cost plus services contract, and the second topic is local supplier preference in terms of the tenders process. So over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Simon. Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Carruthers. So just kicking off, I'll give you a little bit of background first on our present contract models for the maintenance and service contracts. They work on a mixture of lump sum and measure and value payments. It's not ideal for us in terms of asset management because lump sum items are generally for a range of works that could be widely scoped, but the actual nature of the work is largely a little bit unknown. So you might have bridge maintenance or generic potholing could be lump sum payments that are made to the contractor. And there's wins and losses on that. If the contractor has a lot of work in a particular month, they're only getting a certain amount for that work. If they have less, then they still get paid the same amount, irrespective of how much or how little they do. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't track genuine costs against any of our assets. So we don't know when a particular road or a pipeline or a park is costing us more to maintain relative to every other similar asset in the district. Also, with regards to the pricing models, when these contracts are tendered, there's a bit more risk involved for the contracting industry. So there's more potential for them to lose money on certain items. Generic items like grading or mowing of berms are often items that are underpriced. And so there's an issue there with being able to ensure that the delivery of service is maintained at the same level that we require. Now, if a contractor's not making any money out of it, there's a disincentive for them to do it properly. So what we're proposing is that as we renew these contracts, we look towards what's called a cost plus model. So basically, what that is is you're looking at the net cost of the labour and materials and plant and subcontractors to carry out the work, plus any allowance for off-site or on-site overheads and a profit margin. So when it goes to the market, what we're asking for is basically day works or plant and labour rates with an indication from our side of roughly what we would go through in a year, so the market knows the nature of what they're pricing. But that then gives us the ability to correctly price and deliver this level of service that we need to. We can increase or reduce the level of service instantly throughout the contract without actually causing any variations to the contract terms. So there's the ability to track against all of our assets correctly, what they're actually costing, gives us a better way of managing those assets. So that's where we're looking towards. At the moment, I'm working with Buller District Council, helping them put together their maintenance contract, which is going out for tender this year. They've actually been using Cost Plus very successfully for a number of years on their present, and are keeping that model going forward. And so that's why we're looking at it for our contracts. Is there any questions as relating to that?
Yep.
Online.
Through the chair, Carl, what's the what would be the cost for this Cost Plus to operate?
The cost is whatever we've got in the budget. So the beauty in that is if we choose to cut an area, or if we have to cut an area, or even if we have to, if we increase the funding in an area, we've got those changes available without actually constituting a significant change in the contract. So it doesn't invalidate the contract. We don't need to renegotiate terms. We can simply change the nature of the contract relative to the amount of funding that we've got available.
So you're saying you've got this in place already, or?
No, we don't use it at present. We use a different system which is the lump sum and measure and value.
Oh,
what we want to do is just get the agreement of the councillors to go for this other model, which provides more surety for us, provides more surety for the contractor. It actually helps provide a more collaborative working relationship between the principal and the contract.
You got it now. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
Simon, this strikes me as an operational kind of issue. I'm wondering what, if anything, formal is required from us at all.
Just through the chair. So this will potentially require changes to the procurement process, procedures, and also the policy. So this is just a verbal update in terms of what future works may be coming, and just advising this group that we're looking to go down this track.
Right.
So if we get consensus on this, we'll proceed down that way.
And Simon, does it tick the box for you?
It provides a lot more flexibility for us to manage accordingly, particularly in these times, when there is a fair bit of uncertainty, that we can bring on work or turn off work as we can manage it, and make sure we actually hit our budget numbers.
Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments for Carl?
Through the chair, so just wondering how widespread this model is among other councils.
I'm not entirely certain. I know there are a number of others that are using it. It depends on the nature of the markets that are there at the time as to which model they prefer. I think in general, it is a better opportunity for us to follow this path. Effectively, you've got three methods. You could either go complete lump sum, or you could go measure and value, or you can go cost plus. Presently, we use a mixture of two, but it's not ideal for an asset management point of view.
Do you know on the West Coast, through the chair, what the Buller and Grey Council's model?
So Grey is the same as us presently, but they are looking towards that cost plus model, depending on how well it goes with the other two. Buller have extensively used cost plus for at least the last 10 years, and have great success with it, and have a very good relationship with their contracting base.
I'm just conscious that a council has to be seen to be aware of the, sorry, I'm explaining myself. When a council owns ultimately owns the contracting company, there have to be those steps of in between. I just wondered how that sits with the CCO role.
It doesn't make any change effectively. They still tender rates relative to anybody else in the market. What we can touch on in my next conversation point is the local supplier preference, and perhaps we can address that a little bit in that side of things.
Okay, Simon, should we move on to that issue?
If anyone doesn't have any more questions for Carl, we can move to the next topic.
Thanks, Carl.
Right, okay, so on to that, the local supplier preference. And this is really something that's come out of the whole COVID situation. It's being looked at a lot more closely with regards to helping to stimulate local economies and help the local economies grow better. So within the government rules of sourcing, there are some fairly general rules, a couple of which relate to being fair to all suppliers, getting the best deal for everybody. But we can also look at benefits to our local economy as a result of awarding in certain ways. So things that we can consider are opportunities for regional businesses, for social and environmental and cultural outcomes. And that can help in selecting certain suppliers that tick those boxes. So what's being looked at a wider level, it's certainly been talked about, is how we go about doing that, and how we evaluate that at tender stage. And some of those things would be considering how we score relative to things such as how many local staff will be employed as a result of picking a particular contractor. What percent of a contract works might be given to local contractors or subcontracted to local contractors. What investments is the tenderer going to be making in the local economy with regards to servicing, support, vehicles, plants, material supply, and all of those things. So these are things that are more social aspects of tenders that we can look at and evaluate further, and that's something that we will need to be looking at the criteria that we set going into that as to how we evaluate these and how we measure these. There's some other options there which may relate to changes in some of the procedures that we go for. Certain works we may be looking at more invited tenders. We may set requirements for tenderers to have a local base of operations, and then establishing what that local base of operations means. It might be a distance from here, or it might be that they simply have a set yard or workshop here where they can set up a base of operations. So there's a number of things that we will be exploring more to try and help stimulate the local economy, and these are things moving forward that we can put into bigger contracts as well. Any questions?
Sounds pretty sensible to me. Anyone have any observations or comments?
Yep, through the chair.
Councillor.
Is there a direction from government to use more local based operations?
Well, it's covered in the ethos really behind the government rules of sourcing. It's not a mandate as yet, but it's certainly something that a lot of government agencies are talking about. We've got, I mean, if we get some of the funding that we've applied for, we've got a lot of work that we need to be getting out. How we get that out is going to be the next task, and whether we task it to, or try and task it as much local as possible, or whether we go broader, is going to be the next question.
Any other comments? Councillors? Your Worship.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, I thank you, Carl, for putting the effort into that. It ties in completely with the need over the next few years to shop locally, and it gives contractors in the various towns, Haast, Fox Franz, Hoagie, it gives them recognition for the fact that they've gone to the trouble of setting up there, and I thank you very much for putting the effort in.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor Madgett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agree with His Worship on that. Shop local is the key, and despite what the critics say, this is the type of work that we're talking about being tendered is this is the bread and butter of a council. This is what councils do, and the council also has a role in straitened times like we've got now, that we're facing for I don't know how long now in wake of COVID-19. So the council very much has a role to play in the economic recovery of that. So I think it's to have extra weight to local contractors is very sensible.
Thank you. Carl, are you envisaging coming up with something formal?
Yeah, well, I've been going through what we've got in our procurement policy and so forth, and it does tend to lead that direction anyway at the moment. There may not be a need to make too many changes. The formal side of things, I think, will be more looking at how we're actually scoring, and I think the committee wants to have a bit more of an input into how we structure the scoring in these contracts going forward, which is a good thing, and that would be the more formal aspect that we'd be looking at on a case-by-case basis in some instances. But
so what's required from this committee? Anything at this stage?
Nothing at this stage, no.
Okay.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, we just have to receive both verbal updates.
Okay. Someone move that both verbal updates from Carl Jackson be received. I'll move that. I'll move that way. Seconded by His Worship. All those in favour, wave your hands or say aye, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I think, Simon, that brings us to the end of the agenda, formal agenda, doesn't it?
That's correct.
So would someone move that we go into confidential at this point? Councillor Hart, seconded by Councillor Davidson, who blinked his eye.
Give you the eye, eh?
He gave me the eye, mate. So is Di, I don't see Di. Is Di there somewhere?
Yes, I'm here, Deputy Mayor.
So we cease live streaming at this point, do we?
Yes, we do. And if we could just, through you, Chair, if we could just have a break for 2 minutes just to ensure that the live streaming has stopped, please.
Okay. Anyone like to tell a joke while we test out the system? Okay.